Today from the global lane, one nation under Xi. Persecution escalating in China. Churches shut down, crosses and Bibles burned. Nearby in Burma, crimes against humanity. Atrocities against Rohingya, Kachin and Shan ethnics. Even children are targeted. On the home front, betrayed at the White House. Who's the Judas? Is the president on the ropes or is something up his sleeve? And who gets credit for a booming economy, Trump or Obama? And it's all right here, right now from the global lane. The United States Commission on International Religious Freedom says Christians in China are facing an alarming escalation of persecution. This week, Public Security Bureau police invaded and shut down Zion Church in Beijing. Moments before that raid, this sign appeared just outside the church sanctuary. Now it looks like this. PSB agents removed the sign. No church here. Amen. Members of Zion Church were not deterred. Although authorities closed their building, they continued to pray and worship outside in the street. Also this summer, other Christians throughout China have seen their churches closed or demolished. Government officials have arrested church leaders. They've confiscated and burned Bibles, and they're still removing crosses from atop church buildings. What in the world is going on in China, and why now? Well, here to provide some insights is Voice of the Martyrs radio host and spokesman Todd Nettleton. So, Todd, is this something new or more of the same?
Well, we are seeing more persecution or a higher level of persecution. There's a couple of developments that have happened this year that I think contribute to that. One of those is in February, new regulations on religious affairs took effect all across China. And so we're seeing those regulations now being put into effect and enforced. We're seeing how that's being translated from the national government down to the provincial level and then to the local level, and how that's affecting churches. Another thing that affects this is the fact that in March, Chinese President Xi Jinping was essentially given a lifetime contract. He was renewed his presidency and was told that term limits are no longer apply to you. So he can essentially serve as president for as long as he wants. And one of his emphasis, even going back to his days as a provincial leader, was on controlling religious expression and controlling the church. And so we're seeing that what he put into effect as a provincial leader, now that he's the president of the entire country, that same emphasis is spreading from the national government level down to every part of China.
Why is it happening now?
Well, our Christian brothers and sisters in China are telling us that this is the worst persecution they've seen, even going back to the Cultural Revolution. And what's happening is the government at the national level is trying to exert more and more control over religious expression. What we've seen in the last number of months is the government will come into a church and say, hey, why don't you take down that picture of Jesus in your sanctuary and put up these patriotic posters instead? Why don't you not sing hymns to start out your service? Why don't you sing some patriotic songs about the wonderfulness of the Communist Party? One pastor in Beijing not long ago was told by the government, they said, Pastor, we don't mind if you continue holding your services. We just want to put this camera on your platform looking out at the audience, and it's attached to facial recognition software so that we can tell who comes to church on Sunday and who's there and what they're doing and how involved they are. The pastor obviously said, no, we're not going to allow you to do that. And just last weekend, that church was shut down. Officials came to the service. They said, nope, you are closed. You cannot meet anymore. So basically, the national government is making more and more effort to control every facet of religious expression in China. And this is not only affecting Christians. There are tens of thousands of Muslims in Western China that have been detained, and they're also seeking to control religious expression by Muslims as well.
What impact is this likely to have on the church and Christianity in China?
The larger gatherings may stop for a while, may be put on hold, and we will see more and more smaller gatherings. One of the challenges for the church in that situation is, okay, if we're not meeting in one group of 400, but we're meeting in lots of groups of 12 to 20, we need a lot of group leaders. We need leadership that is trained and ready to lead those groups. And so leadership development becomes a high priority in that situation.
What can our viewers do about it?
You know, the first thing that we can do is pray for the church in China, pray for our brothers and sisters there as they go through this time of trial. And not long ago on our Voice of the Martyrs radio podcast, we had a guest, one of our workers who's very involved with the church in China. And I asked him how we could pray, and he gave what I think is a very insightful prayer request. He said, pray especially for the young people who are part of the church in China, because they've never faced this before. They've never been through this. Their parents and their grandparents have gone through persecution. They've seen how God sustains and God empowers and protects during times of trial and times of suffering. But these young people within the church, they haven't been through it. They haven't seen that. And so naturally, like many of us, they're intimidated. They're a little frightened by how are we going to deal with this level of persecution that we're facing. And so secondly, we can have a voice, and we can have a voice to our own government officials. You know, a lot of the conversation between the U.S. government and the Chinese government right now is about trade. But we need to make sure that our government officials here know that we vote and that we care about religious freedom, that they should use their influence, and we expect them to use their influence.
Okay, Todd Nettleton of the Voice of the Martyrs, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Gary.
Angels were created to serve God. These magnificent beings have awesome power beyond our comprehension.
CBN presents Angels, Their Power, Purpose, and Presence. In Pat's latest DVD, you'll get the biblical insight into these mysterious spiritual creatures and discover the important role they play in God's kingdom and in your life.
We're also going to meet real people who have come face to face with these divine creatures and have experienced what can only be described as miraculous, life-changing encounters.
As he started pulling me through, it was just a burst of white light.
My thought is the angels were there to hold me together.
I knew that this was something that was happening, and it was supernatural.
Angels, their power, purpose, and presence.
Call now or go to cbn.com to get your copy of Angels.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
Hundreds of thousands of Rohingya refugees are languishing in camps during the harsh monsoon rainy season in Bangladesh. Now the International Criminal Court appears ready to hold the Burmese government responsible for their plight. The ICC says there's sufficient evidence to bring the Burmese government to trial for committing atrocities against the Rohingya. Well, joining us with more is Nicholas Ambrose of the Faith Coalition to Stop Genocide in Burma. Nicholas, why should the Burmese government be held accountable? Explain for our viewers what has happened to this people group.
Gary, first of all, as you know from traveling there, the Burmese government is run by the Burmese military. They really control 75% or more of the country, and they persecute anyone who is not Buddhist. 88% of the country is Buddhist, but you had over 1 million Rohingya Muslims before 2017, and 4 to 6 million Christians. These people have been persecuted for decades. George W. Bush's administration put sanctions on them in 2003. President Obama lifted them in the fall of 2016, And since then, the onslaught, the brutality has ramped up to the point that that Burmese military created a genocidal campaign, chased out the remaining 1 million Rohingya Muslims. And those same military divisions that chased out the Rohingya have repositioned to go after the Kachin Christians in the north. The problem is, not only have the Kachin been persecuted, there is nowhere for them to run. They're between the borders of India and China.
So you visited those refugee camps in Bangladesh. Explain the conditions that you witnessed and saw there. Also, I understand that a trial may be held now because of the ICC's ruling. So if the Burmese government is found guilty, what would happen, if anything? I'm sure those people wouldn't be running back home right away.
Right. So I did visit the camps this spring, and I mostly met with women and children. And the UN has found, and the US has found, that 51 to 52% of the surviving women, so not even the slaughtered women, the surviving women have been raped in those camps. The people who struck me the most, there was a 13-year-old girl. Like many of the women, she'd been pulled out in a group of 5 to 6 and brutalized in ways we can't even imagine by 10 soldiers at a time. That was their MO. And this sweet girl, she reminded me of Princess Aurora because she had this pink kind of gauzy princess dress on. She now is treated for STDs in a camp. The women she lives with have lost almost all their children. One woman lost every single child she had. Another one had one of her 4 children left, and they saw their children slaughtered before their eyes. So at the UN level, they have called the genocide. They have the Commission, Human Rights has issued a report. We are just about to await this. Our own State Department has really commissioned an atrocities report that Nikki Haley quoted just over a week ago in the UN Security Council. So we know the figures are staggering. We are hoping Secretary Pompeo will very shortly release that report and make a declaration of genocide. And then at the same time, the International Criminal Court has recognized jurisdiction on this case because essentially the Burmese military was chasing the Rohingya across into Bangladesh, which they compared to a cross-border shooting. So we're very much looking forward to just justice for these Rohingya, but at the same time, we need to make sure that Kachin and the other Christians in the country aren't slaughtered, because it looks like they are next on the Burmese military's list.
I have to ask you about the 2 Reuters news journalists who were found guilty and sentenced to 7 years in prison for reporting the truth about the Rohingya. Now, this isn't fake news, folks. They were reporting the truth. They did a little digging, found some victims of the genocide there. What can you tell us? Tell us a little more about that and those journalists.
So 2 journalists apparently had dinner with some Burmese police officers. And once again, the country is controlled by the military. So the military and the police, local police, work together on everything. And they apparently slid into newspapers that they had at the table some documents which talked about the Rohingya crimes. I don't believe the information was inaccurate. The government then went to frame these 2 Reuters journalists for reporting and for having this information and reporting on the brutality committed by the military and the police. And they were just sentenced to 7 years in jail for this. I'm really hoping this gets a lot more international attention. Amal Clooney had signed on as one of their barristers. Lots of action there. But I just want to make sure everyone knows you can follow us in everything we are doing because we're working hard to get the story out. I think the only thing that is really holding this issue back from getting the attention it needs is just knowledge. And our information is at faithcoalition.org.
Parents, the Superbook Bible app is a great way to get your child reading the Bible because in today's busy world, we can use some help. The free Superbook Bible app has fun stuff your kids will love. They'll have a blast learning the Bible, playing great games, watching cool videos, discovering heroes in the Bible. They'll have fun while they learn God's Word. The Superbook Kids Bible app, available now.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
911, what's your emergency? We have a vehicle that is upside down and on fire. These people are trapped, and we need the jaws of life.
My feet were on fire. The car was filling up with smoke.
There was fire coming in through my left door. Steering wheel was stuck in my chest. I couldn't move.
The seatbelt, I kept trying to release it, but it wouldn't release.
And I just screamed, God, send your angels now.
I saw a set of just white hands. It was just a burst of white light.
On the home front, betrayal at the White House and an unflattering portrait of the president by a journalist who helped bring down Richard Nixon. President Trump is still reeling about someone within his administration who wrote a scathing New York Times editorial about his presidential abilities. It happened at the same time that Bob Woodward released his new book about the Trump White House. Well, joining us to provide some insights is a former Trump campaign advisor who testified before the Robert Mueller grand jury. He's Sam Nunberg. Sam, it's good to see you again. So what do you make of all this so-called White House Judas? Who is it? Why did they write that libelous op-ed?
It is beyond reproach. They say that, look, it's got to be somebody senior, because the New York Times really does understand the risks. The idea, if it came out that it was somebody we've never heard of, I think the lowest level it would be is somebody in the cabinet who is a deputy. I think it would be a senior deputy. But the scary part is that it could be anyone within the White House, possibly. Now, look, the bottom line about that op-ed is it really shows that the two-party duopoly, those Romney people, those McCain people, those Bush people, they don't get how Donald Trump became president. And what I would say is, one of the reasons is it's time for you to do some self-examination and look in the mirror. I think that somebody who wrote this is obviously somebody who has deep connections to John McCain, which means they have deep connections to Bush people as well, probably. And what I would say is it's somebody who hopes that Donald Trump is a one-off, that this didn't happen. If you look at the content of the anonymous op-ed, it said, we as a nation essentially have to examine how this happened. Well, once again, I say look in the mirror, because I'll tell you two reasons why it happened. Two reasons why Donald Trump became the Republican nominee. Very simple. Their names are John McCain and Mitt Romney. Those were two winnable races that were blown.
Sam, what did this controversy say about the president's ability or inability to control his own White House?
Well, it says something, I think, about John Kelly, frankly, if it is from this White House. If it's somebody from this White House, which is why I think everyone within the White House, at least, should be more than happy and able to submit to take a truth detector test. Why not? Because I think this president has to at least know. You could always have somebody in a cabinet who's sitting in a department down Pennsylvania Avenue, but this president has to be sure that he does not have people like this walking around in the around the Oval Office in the West Wing. And the irony, Gary, is one of the things they talked about was trade and tariffs. And obviously that was a lot of the Bob Woodward book, which I've already read. I got an advance copy.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that, Sam. Onto the Woodward book. Any facts here, or is this all fiction? I mean, this is the guy who, along with Carl Bernstein, helped bring down Nixon by reporting about Watergate. So fact or fiction? What's going on?
Well, first of all, what I would say is it was detestable that nobody in this White House made sure that the president was able to be able to sit down to Woodward. This goes to Republican orthodoxy. I have heard for years, and you have heard, Gary, we heard it during the Bush administration, certainly when they allowed China to join the WTO, that if there are tariffs, if we don't enter these multilateral, multi-country, hard to enforce with no reciprocity agreements like Bush did, that the economy would tumble down. I mean, first of all, you look 18 years later after Bush, and what this president inherited. But here's the funny point, Gary. This president has put in tariffs. He is putting in this agenda. And Gary, guess what? The economists will tell you, these Republican economists from the think tanks will tell you, don't believe your lying eyes. But the manufacturing numbers are rising.
Sam, are there any October surprises ahead from this president before the midterm? If so, what do you expect?
Well, what I hope is that this president is able to campaign as much as he needs to. Remember, this midterm is essentially his first reelect, and all the hard work that we did, especially the evangelical voters, the social conservative voters, the faith voters. Those are the ones who delivered this president the victory that he was able to get. That was a historic victory. It was more electoral votes than any other Republican president has gotten in over 25 plus years. And if the Democrats take over Congress, Gary, remember, this will end badly, or it could end badly, because they will put articles of impeachment through Congress on anything and everything. I also think that what we are going to see sooner than later, Gary, because obviously Jeff Sessions won't do it, is that this president is going to release documents which will show us how the Obama administration, under the Obama White House, the FBI conducted a counterintelligence operation which continued into after this man swore office, Donald Trump. He has so many enemies. Once again, just like that anonymous op-ed by some high-flying Republican wrote, some country club Republican wrote, they don't like the fact that we voted for Donald Trump. They don't get it. He is out there. He's at war.
Sam Nunberg, thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Hello? Is this thing on? Hey, kids, do you love games? And do you love discovering things? Well, do ya?
Then you're gonna love this. It's the new free Superbook Kids Bible app. You can play games, watch videos, find answers to your questions, and a whole lot more. The new Superbook Kids Bible app. Free downloads available on iTunes and Google Play now.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
When you give, smiles grow bigger. When you care, homes are happier. When you comfort, the hurt goes away. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
President Obama recently returned to the limelight, trying to influence the upcoming midterm election by campaigning in California. He spoke about politicians spreading fear, but then he did exactly that when he warned us about the importance of this election.
This is a consequential moment in our history. And the fact is that if we don't step up, things can get worse.
So the message from the former president is, you must vote the way I believe, and if you don't, The country is in for some bad times. He also said this midterm election will give us the chance to restore sanity to politics.
We have the chance to flip the House of Representatives and make sure there are real checks and balances in Washington. And I cannot tell you, all across the country, you can feel the energy.
Yes, the energy, sanity, and checks and balances he proposes are actually just the opposite. Democrats say if they recapture control of the House of Representatives, they'll impeach this duly elected president. Their promise comes despite a new Gallup poll, which shows only 29% of Americans believe the president acted illegally during the 2016 election. So while the country's been distracted with Russian collusion for the past 2 years, the only thing that will get done in Washington in 2019 is impeachment. Is that really the course we want to pursue for our nation? President Obama also wants to take credit for the good things that are happening. He reminded people that current job numbers are about the same as they were during the last 2 years of his presidency. True, overall numbers are about the same, but not the number of manufacturing jobs. 327,000 of those were added during the past year. That's the highest number in 23 years. Or what about unemployment? 3.9%. That's the lowest in about 50 years. And it's the lowest it has ever been for African Americans and other minorities. What about the stock market? Record high. New factory startups and expansions are also up. So is consumer confidence. Last month, the Consumer Confidence Index was the highest since August 2000. And according to the National Federation of Independent Business, small business optimism jumped to a record high in August. Also, middle-class income has just reached an all-time high of just over $61,000 per year. So, President Obama, with all due respect, you didn't build that. Your policies actually slowed the economic recovery. You can't spend yourself out of a recession and into economic prosperity. And you nearly doubled the national debt from $10.5 trillion when you entered office to $18 trillion when you left. Must have been all those shovel-ready jobs that you created. That was the cost. Well, people are still searching for those. Obama also added 97,000 pages of regulations to the Federal Registry during his final year as president. That was about 40,000 more than Ronald Reagan's highest year, 1981. President Reagan had a saying, "Government isn't the solution to our problem. Government is the problem." And when it comes to the American economy, less is more. Less regulation, less taxes on the people, and it all works together to create more jobs, more wealth, more prosperity. It's that simple. Yes, Donald Trump, not Barack Obama, deserves credit where credit is due, folks. His tax cuts and deregulation have made a big difference in creating economic prosperity. Now, let's pray it's here to stay. Well, that's it from the Global Lane. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, and Twitter. And until next time, be blessed.